The shimmering spires of the Galactic Empire's assembly hall loomed against the void, an architectural marvel of dark metals and alien etchings. Ambassador Timothy Holt adjusted the collar of his formal suit as the shuttle docked. Despite his years of experience negotiating across the galaxy, the weight of this particular mission pressed heavily on his shoulders. As the ramp lowered with a pneumatic hiss, he stepped forward, his boots meeting the polished floor of the Empire's grand corridor. The alien guards flanking him were as silent as statues, their expressions unreadable behind sleek visors. Timothy had rehearsed this moment 100 times. The human alliance had sent him as a last-ditch effort to salvage peace. Diplomatic overtures had been tense for years, but recent skirmishes on contested outer territories had pushed humanity and the Empire to the brink. This summit, he knew, was a fragile bridge suspended over a chasm of annihilation. The assembly hall was cavernous, its ceilings vanishing into shadows. Alien delegates, their forms cloaked in shimmering robes, lined the perimeter. At the center of it all stood Supreme Envoyifix, tall and imposing, his black robes reflecting a faint iridescence. Timothy forced himself to maintain composure as he approached the central platform. The envoy's gaze, cold and calculating, bore into him with the weight of a predator assessing its prey. "Ambassador Holt," Efix intoned, his voice reverberating unnaturally in the vast chamber. "The Galactic Empire acknowledges your presence. State your purpose." Timothy inclined his head slightly, his tone carefully measured. "The human alliance extends its hand in the hope of forging a future built on cooperation and mutual respect. Our history has been fraught with misunderstanding, but I believe that together we can misunderstanding." Efix interrupted, his lips curving into a humorless smile. "Ambassador, it is not misunderstanding that defines our history. It is hubris. Humanity presumes to stand among the stars as our equal, yet your kind clings to the edges of relevance. You have nothing to offer us." The tension in the room thickened, every gaze fixed on Timothy. He refused to falter. "Strength is not measured by dominance, Supreme Envoy. It is measured by unity. Humanity may seem small in your eyes, but we stand together and we offer a galaxy of potential allies against." Efix raised a hand, silencing him. "Potential ally. You speak of strength and unity, yet you come here alone, a fragile voice in a storm." He gestured, and the chamber doors behind Timothy slid open. Heavy, deliberate footsteps echoed as armed guards entered, their weapons gleaming ominously. Timothy turned slowly, his heart pounding. "What is the meaning of this?" Timothy's voice was steady, though his pulse raced. He turned back to Efix, whose expression remained impassive. "This is the meaning," Efix said coldly. "Your kind believes in diplomacy, in the power of words to shield you from reality. But diplomacy is merely a tool for those who lack true power. The Empire does not negotiate from a place of weakness, Ambassador. Your presence here was never about peace." Timothy felt the weight of realization crash over him. He took a step back, his eyes darting to the guards closing in. "You don't have to do this," he said, his voice rising with urgency. "This will lead only to war. Millions will suffer." "Billions' war is the natural order of the galaxy," Efix interrupted. "The weak perish, and the strong endure. Humanity has overstayed its welcome." The guards raised their weapons in unison. Timothy's breath caught, but he refused to plead. "You think this will break us," he said, his voice firm despite the dread pooling in his stomach. "But humanity will not be cowed by fear." A burst of light and sound drowned his final words. When the chamber fell silent again, Timothy's lifeless form crumpled to the floor, a crimson stain spreading across the polished surface. The delegates watched without emotion as Efix gestured to a nearby officer. "Transmit this image to the Human Alliance," he ordered. "Let them see the cost of defiance." Meanwhile, across the vast gulf of space, Admiral John Harker sat in the command room of Earth's central military hub. The transmission played out on the main screen, and as the image of his friend's execution seared itself into his mind, a quiet fury took hold. The room fell into a stunned silence, broken only by the Admiral's steady breathing. He stood slowly, his fists clenched at his sides. "Enough," he said, his voice low but carrying the weight of unshakable resolve. "No more waiting, no more diplomacy. We will show them what it means to awaken a united humanity." The officers in the room exchanged glances, their faces a mixture of shock and grim determination. Harker's gaze hardened as he turned to his second-in-command. Summon the council. Humanity's survival begins now. The council chamber in Washington, D.C. was alive with a storm of voices, anger and fear mingling in a cacophony of disbelief. The transmission of Ambassador Timothy Holt's execution had ignited a firestorm across the human alliance, and now the leaders of Earth and its colonies were gathered to determine their course. Admiral John Harker sat at the head of the table, his jaw set in a grim line as he watched the chaos unfold. Around him were the most powerful decision-makers of humanity, and yet their power felt hollow in the face of the Empire's brutal display. "This is madness." Defense Minister Anton Reeve slammed his hand on the table, his voice cutting through the din. "We are outnumbered, outgunned, and scattered. Declaring war on the Empire would be suicide." "And doing nothing." Harker's voice was cold, precise. "What do you think will happen if we let this pass?" "They killed Holt to send a message. If we don't respond, it won't stop here. They'll see us as weak, ripe for conquest." Reeve glared at him, but Harker held his ground. His mind was a battlefield of emotions: rage at the Empire, grief for Holt, and a steely determination to protect humanity at all costs. Across the table, Commander Alex Grant leaned forward, his expression fierce. "The Admiral's right," Grant said. "The Empire isn't going to stop. They've made it clear they see us as nothing more than vermin. If we don't fight back now, we might as well surrender the entire galaxy." Grant's words hung in the air, resonating with the weight of hard truths. He had lost everything to the Empire: his family, his home. His voice carried the raw edge of someone who had seen the worst of their enemy and lived to tell the tale. Yet even as his conviction spread across the room, it was met with resistance. "Let's not romanticize this," Reeves snapped. "The Empire's military capabilities dwarf ours. They have entire fleets equipped with technology we can barely comprehend." A direct confrontation would be catastrophic. Harker stood, his imposing presence silencing the room. "I understand your concerns, Minister, but this isn't just about military might. This is about survival. They see us as a threat because of what we represent: freedom, unity, defiance. If we don't stand now, we'll lose everything that makes us who we are." The room fell silent, the weight of Harker's words settling on every shoulder. Eyes shifted, glances exchanged, but no one dared to speak. Harker turned to the holographic display at the center of the table. It showed the sectors of space controlled by the human alliance, dwarfed by the vast expanse of the Empire's territories. Yet there were pockets of resistance, alien factions, oppressed species, groups that might stand with humanity if given a reason to fight. "We're not alone," Harker continued. "The Empire's tyranny stretches across the galaxy, and there are others who suffer under their rule. If we unite with them, we can turn the tide. This war won't be won with brute force alone. It will be won with strategy, alliances, and the resolve of a united humanity." His words carried a gravity that drew the room together. Even Reeves seemed to hesitate, the ironclad certainty of his objections cracking under the weight of Harker's resolve. The hologram shifted to show potential allies, species who had expressed disdain for the Empire or suffered under its oppression. The possibilities were faint, but they were there. "You speak of alliances," Reeves said finally, his tone softer but no less cautious. "But reaching out to them risks exposing our vulnerabilities. If they refuse to help or worse, betray us, we'll be left even weaker." "Then we take that risk," Grant said, his voice firm. "We've already seen what happens when we wait and hope for the best. Holt believed in diplomacy, and look where that got us." "It's time for action," the council murmured in agreement, the tide shifting toward a consensus. Harker felt a spark of hope amidst the gloom. He wasn't leading a fractured alliance anymore. He was leading a coalition on the brink of unity. Yet even as the decision solidified, the enormity of what lay ahead was impossible to ignore. "We'll need every resource, every mind, and every soldier at our disposal," Harker said. "This won't be a short war, and it won't be an easy one, but it's a war we must fight because the alternative is extinction." The decision was made, orders were sent out, plans set into motion. Across the alliance, ships were mobilized, defenses bolstered, and emissaries dispatched to alien factions. The galaxy began to shift as humanity prepared to stand against the Empire. In the midst of it all, Harker stood alone in his quarters, staring out at the stars. He thought of Holt, of the man who had believed so deeply in the power of words to build bridges. Holt had been a diplomat, a friend, and a symbol of humanity's hope for peace. Now his death was a catalyst for war. "I won't let them break us," Harker murmured to the void. "We'll show them what humanity can do." The stars offered no reply, but they burned brightly, as if to echo his resolve. Delta Team moved with precision through the dimly lit corridors of Station Zeta, their boots barely making a sound against the cold metal floors. Commander Alex Grant signaled for silence, his hand raised as he listened intently. The distant hum of alien machinery and the faint thrum of energy conduits filled the oppressive quiet, broken only by the occasional murmur from Lieutenant David Sinclair as he worked his portable console. "Control room is 2 levels down," Sinclair whispered, his fingers dancing across the screen. "I'm disabling their security grid now." Grant nodded and motioned for the team to move. Their mission was clear: infiltrate the Empire supply hub, extract critical intelligence, and get out before reinforcements arrived. The stakes were astronomical. The data they sought could shift the balance of power, revealing weaknesses in the Empire's fleet movements and supply lines. Failure wasn't an option. Each step forward felt like an eternity, tension crackling in the air. Delta Team had trained for this, but no amount of preparation could erase the weight of what they carried. They were humanity's sharp edge, thrust into the heart of the enemy. Every choice they made could ripple across the galaxy, shaping the course of the war. Sinclair paused abruptly, his face pale as his console beeped in warning. "They've detected us. Internal sensors are offline, but something triggered an alert. Reinforcements are inbound." Grant swore under his breath. "No time to second guess. We stick to the plan. Sinclair, focus on that control room. We'll hold them off." The team moved faster now, urgency driving them as the corridors began to pulse with red emergency lights. The sound of marching boots echoed from behind, growing louder. Alien voices barked orders in a guttural language, their tones sharp and unyielding. Delta Team reached the control room just as the first shots rang out, bursts of energy sizzling through the air. "Hold the door," Grant barked, taking cover behind a console as he returned fire. "Sinclair, how much longer?" "Almost there." Sinclair's voice was tight with concentration. His hands trembled as he connected his console to the alien systems, bypassing layer after layer of encryption. The Empire's technology was leagues ahead of humanity's, but Sinclair had a gift, a mind that could see patterns where others saw chaos. The firefight intensified. Delta Team's precision kept the enemy at bay, but the sheer number of reinforcements threatened to overwhelm them. Grant felt the heat of a near miss scorch the air beside him. His team was outnumbered, but they fought with a ferocity born of desperation and determination. "Got it," Sinclair shouted, his console emitting a triumphant chime. "Data is downloading." 30 seconds. "Make it 20, Grant yelled, covering Sinclair as a fresh wave of enemies stormed the hallway. The team's medic, Private Lena Torres, dropped to one knee beside him, firing off controlled bursts while keeping an eye on the wounded. "Commander, we're running out of time," Torres called, her voice strained. "They're bringing heavier artillery." Grant's mind raced. The mission was critical, but the cost was rising. He couldn't let his team be wiped out. Not here, not like this. Yet retreat without the data would mean losing humanity's best chance at survival. "Sinclair, status," he demanded. "Done." Sinclair yanked the drive from his console, clutching it tightly as if it were a lifeline. "We've got everything we need." "Move," Grant shouted, leading the team out of the control room and back into the labyrinthine corridors. The retreat was chaotic, bursts of energy lighting the way as Delta Team fought their way toward the extraction point. The station seemed alive now, its defenses reacting with a cold, mechanical intelligence. Turrets emerged from walls, their barrels glowing ominously. Grant's instincts kicked in. "Split up. Torres, take Sinclair and flank left. The rest of you, with me. Draw their fire." The team obeyed without hesitation, their trust in Grant absolute. Torres and Sinclair broke off, navigating the maze-like corridors with speed. Sinclair clutched the data drive, his breathing ragged. Every step felt like a marathon, every corner a potential ambush. Grant's group held the line, covering the others with calculated bursts of fire. He moved like a predator, his rifle a seamless extension of his body, yet even he couldn't ignore the growing sense of dread. They were deep in enemy territory, and every delay increased the risk of being cut off entirely. At the extraction point, the drop ship awaited, its engines humming with restrained power. Torres and Sinclair arrived first, the pilot gesturing frantically for them to board. Sinclair stumbled inside, collapsing onto a seat as Torres took up a defensive position at the hatch. Minutes stretched into lifetimes as the rest of the team appeared, battered but alive. Grant was the last to board, his weapon still firing as he backed up the ramp. The hatch sealed with a deafening clang, and the ship surged into motion, engines roaring as it raced away from the station. Inside, silence reigned for a moment, broken only by labored breaths and the hum of the ship's systems. Grant slumped against the wall, his rifle hanging loosely in his grip. His eyes met Sinclair's, and for the first time since the mission began, a faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "You did good, Lieutenant," Grant said, his voice hoarse. "That data better be worth it." Sinclair nodded, holding up the drive as if to reassure himself it was still there. "It will be," he said, his voice shaking with exhaustion and relief. Back at the fleet's command center, Admiral Harker reviewed the data with grim satisfaction. It was more than they had hoped for fleet positions, supply routes, vulnerabilities in the Empire's defenses. The mission had cost them, but it had given humanity a chance. Harker's gaze hardened as he looked at the holographic map, his mind already racing ahead. The war was far from over, but the tide was beginning to turn. The Human Alliance fleet hung in the blackness of space, an array of ships poised at the edge of the Galactic Empire's core sector. Inside the flagship Resolute, Admiral John Harker stood before the tactical display, his expression carved from stone. The Intelligence Delta team had extracted revealed the Empire's command center, an immense orbital station fortified with the most advanced technology the galaxy had ever known. Taking it out wasn't just a mission, it was humanity's best shot at crippling the Empire's hold on the galaxy. "Final checks," Admiral Commander Alex Grant's voice crackled over the comm. "All teams are in position. The decoy fleet is ready to engage." "Understood," Harker replied, his voice steady. "Initiate the operation." Moments later, the decoy fleet emerged from hyperspace, charging directly toward the Empire's outer defenses. Alarms blared across the enemy's network as their ships scrambled to respond. The deception worked perfectly. The Empire redirected the majority of its fleet toward the supposed attack, leaving the command center lightly defended. On board the Resolute, Delta team prepared for their mission. Grant double-checked his weaponry, his sharp gaze flicking to Lieutenant David Sinclair, who was running diagnostics on his equipment. Sinclair's hands moved with a confidence that hadn't been there during the mission to Station Zeta. The fire of determination burned in his eyes. Now he had proven himself, and he was ready to prove himself again. "This is the big one," Grant said as he approached Sinclair. "No mistakes, no second chances." Sinclair nodded, meeting Grant's gaze. "I won't let you down, Commander." "I know," Grant said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Let's finish this." The dropship carrying Delta team descended toward the Empire's command station, its cloaking system rendering it nearly invisible. As they approached the station's perimeter, Sinclair worked feverishly to disable the external sensors. His success was rewarded with a green light on his console and the satisfying absence of alarms. The ship docked silently, its hatch opening to reveal the cold, sterile corridors of the station. Grant led the team inside, their movements swift and deliberate. Every corner, every shadow was a potential threat. The mission parameters were clear. Infiltrate the station's core, disable its defensive systems, and upload a virus to its network that would paralyze the Empire's fleet coordination. The corridors grew narrower as they approached the core. Signs of resistance began to emerge, alien soldiers patrolling in tight formations, automated turrets scanning the hallways. Delta team moved like ghosts, neutralizing threats with precision and silence. Despite their efficiency, the tension was palpable. Every step brought them closer to the heart of the Empire's power. They reached the core, a massive chamber filled with pulsating energy conduits and glowing control terminals. Sinclair immediately got to work, connecting his console to the alien systems. The rest of the team formed a perimeter, their weapons trained on the entrances. The first wave of reinforcements came almost immediately. Alien soldiers poured into the chamber, their weapons blazing. The team held their ground, their training and coordination turning the confined space into a deadly gauntlet for the attackers. Grant barked orders, his voice cutting through the chaos as he directed his team's fire. "How much longer, Sinclair?" Grant shouted as he reloaded his weapon. Almost there, Sinclair's voice was strained, sweat dripping down his face as he typed furiously. "The system's fighting me, but I'm close." The battle intensified. Delta Team's ammunition ran low, and the alien reinforcements showed no sign of stopping. The sound of energy blasts and shouted commands echoed through the chamber, mingling with the hum of the station's machinery. Suddenly, Sinclair's console beeped in triumph. "I've got it!" he yelled. "The virus is uploading now. Good work," Grant said, but his relief was short-lived. A new enemy entered the chamber, towering and clad in gleaming black armor. It was Supreme Envoy Fix himself, flanked by an elite guard. His presence froze the room, the sheer weight of his authority pressing down on everyone. "So," Ifix said, his voice a chilling blend of amusement and disdain, "the vermin have crawled into the lion's den." Admirable but futile, Grant stepped forward, his weapon raised. "Your reign ends here, Ifix." The envoy's response was a burst of energy that sent Grant diving for cover. The battle resumed with a ferocity that dwarfed what had come before. Delta Team fought valiantly, but Ifix's forces were relentless. One by one, the team fell back, their injuries mounting. Grant realized what had to be done. He locked eyes with Sinclair, who was still guarding the console. "Get out of here," Grant ordered. "Finish the mission." "What? No," Sinclair protested. "We're not leaving you. That's an order, Lieutenant," Grant barked, his tone leaving no room for argument. Sinclair hesitated, but the desperation in Grant's eyes convinced him. With a reluctant nod, Sinclair and the remaining team members began retreating toward the extraction point, their path cleared by Grant's last stand. The commander fought like a man possessed, holding the enemy at bay with every ounce of strength he had. Back on the Resolute, Harker watched the station's systems falter as Sinclair's virus took effect. The holographic display showed the Empire's fleet in disarray, their ships immobilized and uncoordinated. A grim satisfaction filled him, tempered by the knowledge of the cost. Delta Team survivors returned to the ship, battered but alive. Sinclair handed the data drive to Harker, his expression a mixture of pride and grief. "Grant didn't make it," he said quietly. Harker nodded, his face stoic, but his eyes betraying the weight of the loss. He knew what was at stake. "He gave us this victory." As the Human Alliance fleet regrouped, the station behind them erupted in a cascade of explosions. The command center of the Galactic Empire was no more. The galaxy had shifted, the balance of power tipping away from tyranny. Harker stood on the bridge, staring out at the stars. "They thought they could break us," he murmured, "but they only made us stronger." The war was far from over, but humanity had proven it could stand against the darkness. Together, they would forge a future free from the Empire's shadow. And for those they had lost, they would fight until the galaxy was theirs to reclaim. 40.